repower an old one, which in my mind should be much, much easier. And I think you can see similar things across Europe. So we still have a lot of red tape. We don't have any real prioritization of renewable energies or of building the necessary networks. And I think that's the second most important point. Across Europe, the network is missing, and I think The Economist put in one of his headlines or articles that hack the pylon, don't hack the trees. And I think that's exactly right. If you look at the investments that are needed, I think the Energy Transition Commission speaks about roughly 2 trillion which are needed, 55% of that into renewables, 45% into the networks, into the TSOs. And I think we are now at 250 billion for the transmission networks. So far off from what is actually needed in order to also really bring the energy to the people and to have the storage and to have the networks which are necessary. And last but not least, I think I have the feeling that due to the multiple crises and the multiple issues that are there with the Ukraine war, the Gaza war, the inflation, the interest rate change, the energy transition gets a little bit put on the back burner and a little bit behind, and I think that backlash on ESG in general, but especially also on renewable energies, then is really threatening the pace of the energy transition in Europe and in the US.
Thank you so much. As regards the issues that you mentioned, what things do you think could be done in order to improve, let's say, the time scales as regards the administrative hurdles? If you think it would be easy and realistic, even the complex environmental processing and everything needs to be accelerated. And as regards the grids you mentioned about privatization, so I was wondering, do you think it would be feasible to have large-scale networks totally privatized, let's say, through groups of investors?
Okay, what can be done administrative hurdles? I think there are 2 things. The one thing is a real prioritization. So you have real areas where it simply doesn't take that long in order to build it. You can do that along roads, you can do that along already existing networks or other things. And you need to add, in my understanding, manpower to the municipal organizations, which are faced with a tremendous amount of workload, and you need to add expertise there as well. So you need to invest basically in order for them to process these things faster, to process them better, and you need to make clear that it has priority over many other things. That's much, much more difficult in democracies than in the Western world, but I think it is necessary in order to make the transition work. The privatization is an interesting bit. I think coming from Germany, we have experience with privatizing the TSOs rather heavily. Now the government is taking a step back and is basically trying to, at least, that's my read from it, having an important stake in each of the 4 big TSOs. And I think that is necessary simply in order to protect critical infrastructure. So I would say it needs to be two-folded. A small government portion still makes sense in order to have political will in there, in order to have enough say of the public in there. But I think, of course, we need private investors into these transmission operators in order to speed them up, in order to make it faster, in order to have a better process of building it out. And so I think it is possible, it should be possible, but the question isn't either or, but rather an and for me.
Mm-hmm. And just a bit on the privatization aspect, if there are specific assets that are funded on a BOT basis by investors, would this work like a line and a substation?
Well, this is already done, right? Like you have transmission links which are partially financed that way. I think it makes sense. I think interconnectors are partially financed that way. it makes perfect sense to me to use the markets in order to provide the money as well. I think the role of the state is more providing regulation and providing stability in the regulation in order for private investors then to come in and be able to also have a decent return on what they're actually looking at. And the more money we get from the markets, the less public money we need. That it is, I think, and the more efficient it's going to be as well. And with the stability, then also banks and debt houses can come in and actually provide debt to these projects.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Mr. Psarros, floor is yours now. Please give us a bit of background about Enel Power Labs and your role there, your strategies, and how you see things going forward, as well as the key challenges that you're seeing in the markets and the project development.
Thank you, Evangelos. Good morning to everybody. Welcome in Athens. Thank you also for inviting me to join you in this panel. Well, I work for Enel Green Power Labs. Enel Green Power Labs is a daughter company of the very famous utility Enel. It's a global utility coming from Italy. Our role here in Greece is the role of the independent power producer, only from renewable sources. So we have a fleet of almost half a gigawatt of operating assets, mostly wind, like something like 80% wind of installed capacity and 20% photovoltaics. And in the same time, we have a very ambitious plan for the future, a very ambitious pipeline to install approximately another gigawatt till 2030. And now I will come to the challenges, because installing 1 gigawatt in, let's say, the next 6 years, it will be really tough. It's a tough task. And it is a tough task not because of our powers or because of our financial situation or our appetite. It is simply because there is no room for everybody. And there is no room for everybody because of technical constraints and also because of the way we calculate the technical constraints. So the TSOs have to change a bit their calculating, let's say, methods. They have to be more flexible in the security standards that they set. This is, from one point, very important. Then to feel more comfortable in setting a different security policy, technical security policy. And of course, as a second step, I think it is necessary that we reach a point with a more stable regulatory framework. We keep on saying this, we keep on asking for this, especially in our region, in the Balkan region or in Greece. Let's say, let me focus in my country. The constantly changing regulatory framework is, of course, bringing many obstacles. We have to stress for this. We have, to keep on asking for a more stable regulatory framework. Now, as far as Enel Green Power Labs is concerned, we have a strategy of investing in technology and in people. So we don't wait only for steps coming from, let's say, the ministry or the regulator of the EU Commission. We invest in our technology, and that means batteries right now. This is the new field of investments for us, with the hybrid projects and focusing on flexible power. And of course in people, because only if you have the right people and the motivated people, the inspired people, you can go forward.
Thank you so much. Going a bit to the grid, how would you see in Greece, in addition to the technical constraints, do you see potential for further grid enlargement? There is some discussion in the market that the current approach of IPTO, or let's not just say it is overall the administration, because also REIA is involved and the government is not visionary. They have, let's say, a conservative goal of 27 gigawatts for renewable energy sources up to 2030. This is almost already covered. And taking practice so far, obviously the planning that they are doing is not working, because the previous planning for during the past 5 years was not good enough, and now we have these grid connection issues. And it's quite clear that the same non-visionary conservative planning is being repeated. Do you agree with this position of the market?
Look, I will try to answer in
Diplomatic.
yes, not diplomatic, but in a more personal way, because I have the feeling, I don't know if I represent my company's view on this, but I will speak as a person that is constant in the market since 2008. I feel that policymakers are some steps behind the technology. So the policymakers try to push for changes slower than they should. Technology is faster than our policymakers, and the TSOs, and at least in our case, in Greece, they announce plans that in some cases are already, let's say, old. So we have to move faster, we have to follow the technology trends, and policy makers shouldn't just try to do politics, but they shall, let's say, serve the common interest, which is to bring the technology and let technology bring the solutions. We have the solutions from a technical and technology point of view.
Like smart networks, I guess. And,
correct, correct.
Thank you so much. We're moving forward to Ms. Grete Bukauskaite. Grete, the same question is essentially, so please give us a background in the organization, your role at REIA, the key challenges that you see with respect to scaling of investments, and
okay, so very nice to be here. It's a nice change after snow wilderness to be in Netherlands. I work at REIA Asset Management. It's an established Lithuanian-based asset management provider that currently manages 20 investment vehicles and close to 1 billion euros of assets under management. So the firm itself was established in 2008, and it originally was a real estate fund manager. And since 2016, we have made our first investments into the renewable sector. So currently we have 2 funds that are investing into renewables, and we are planning a third one next year. So key classes of investments of our interest are solar PV and onshore wind. The region of focus is the Baltic states and Poland, at least for the current funds. So most of our operating assets lay in Poland and Lithuania currently. Our under construction assets also in these countries and Latvia as well. And yeah, as all of the developers, we have quite a vast pipeline in all of these countries. And yeah, we primarily invest into ready-to-build projects or development stage projects. So we enter into environmental impact assessment stage or even earlier, because as you can imagine, the markets, so our corner of Europe is quite a fresh market. It's not that full and not that established as the Western Europe. So in order to get the good projects and to build those, you need to enter into them earlier. So basically, if we move then to your next question, so what are key constraints and maybe drivers for the scaling up of the renewables? I would say what both of you already said. So also for the Baltic and the Polish market, which is quite a fresh one, the key concern is changing legal environment. So that sometimes the lack of regulation on certain questions, and on the other hand, changes in this regulation. Because if local government decides, or local TSO decides to change the rules how you get the grid connection, so it causes a delay of a year or even more, because you need to, you need to wait until the legislation is there and to get the grid once again. Of course, they are making very good steps forward to make the whole system more transparent and more suitable also for foreign investors. In general, that is really good, but more stability would be really beneficial for a steady growth of renewable sector. Yeah, the same goes for Poland as well. Of course, we are in, or we are just exiting, I'm not sure, this crisis period where after Ukrainian invasion, you can imagine we are the border region, energy security was question number one, all policies were just like directed to the fact that we need to get energy independence, and therefore, lots of new reforms came into force. So maybe that I'm still reflecting that, and I hope for more stable environment in the future to have the growth. Now, another obstacle that was also really mentioned here is, of course, grid capacity. That's also a topic all over Europe. Both of our partners here have touched upon that, so maybe it's not worth to discuss it in more detail. Another big problem is also human resources. From the administrator side, from the local TSOs and DSO side, because we see that, as you get the projects developed, as you get the building permits, commissioning phase, everywhere you have challenges with human resources from the institutions. Because as renewables are scaling up, more engineers are needed. And I think that is also the case all over Europe, because, the increase of the specialists does not keep up with the growth of the industry itself.
More engineers, young with experience.
Young with experience, exactly. Like the TSOs want them to be.
Young with experience.
Yeah, and I want to say, at least from my experience in the markets that we operate, what really pushes the whole process forward is digitalization, of course, especially in those administrative processes that we have been talking about. When you start using all electronic documentation, you have qualified electronic signatures, that speeds up the whole process a lot. Because from my experience, we have example of Poland, which is still very much dependent on paper documents, and for example, Lithuania, which is, I would say, just 70% digital. So that is really very important part, to have the transparency and good movement of the development process.
Thank you so much. And in terms of strategies employed by Lords and the asset management, what kind of strategies are you employing to address, to the extent, of course, possible, this kind of hurdles?
So our approach, we are quite small company still, and I would say quite a young company. So I would say that our key advantage is that we are quite flexible, and we are not afraid to adopt new strategies basically as the market changes. So again, in this crisis moment, so 3 years ago, we saw a market which was very saturated. For example, Polish market, we have CFD auctions, we have projects that are fully CFD, we have financed that with local banks or like big European institutional banks. So it was a very clear path forward to work with these projects. Then energy prices come, the prices are peaking, the auction prices are falling down, and the period where it was almost impossible to get a 10-year PPA on the current market terms. You can go under the market terms, but it was completely different market out of sudden. So it's really important to just like follow the trends, follow the market, what is happening, maybe to just like adapt to different offtake structures, to have different offtake mixes. And what you also see that when you start doing that, you see that, for example, the financing market, the debt market also changes. Now we see that the debt investors are also adopting some different structures, that they are not so risk averse towards merchant risk. So they are taking some of them, not all of them maybe, but yeah, not yet all of them, but we manage finance projects also that have certain share of merchant risk. So I think that's the key advantage that we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Grete. So I don't know what how much time do we have?
15 more minutes.
15 more minutes. Okay. I think we can go in a more relaxed conversation. So obviously, feel free to pick up the mic and hold the discussions between you. I have some further questions. I think given the audience, it might be interesting to talk a bit about PPAs and how we see their prices impacting and the tenor, obviously, renewable energy projects in the future. So I think it would be useful to, exchange a few views on PPAs, maybe current market expectations in the region where you're active in, and the outlook, tenor, bankability, and things like that. Yeah.
I can start usage. I think PPAs are the new normal. They're there. It started all in the Nordics. They're very well established by now. With the many regulatory changes you've seen, either being in France, Spain, or Italy, it's also a question if a good PPA from a good counterparty isn't worth more for a bank than sometimes. So I think they're here to stay. I think what we are currently seeing in the market, that it's a shifting a little bit from baseload PPAs to pay-as-produced PPAs, simply because they are available. And of course, it's in discussion, like always, like how much market can you put in there? Can it be 60, 70, and how much do you want to have debt financed actually? I think from my perspective, as a bank, it's still the equity is tasked to take the risk of the market. And we rather like the long, boring, stable PPAs then, and finance based on that. But I think they're already very established. They're here to stay, and it's not really a huge discussion anymore.
And in terms of, let's say, pricing, what you're seeing, let's say, overall in your areas in Europe, let's say, pay-as-produced rates?
I don't have it in mind what we've seen on the last project.
Not specific project,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it differs, every 3 months. So it's hard to say the current level of actually.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm not, let's say, aware right now where is the European average price, but at least for the Greek market, I would say that a project, let's say a PV project, pay-as-generated, with a COD within 2024 and for 10 years duration, a fair value should be between, let's say, 55 and 60 euros. Of course, there are variations, and there are, let's say, many factors that you have to put inside, and the off-taker could push for lower price, the seller could push for higher, but I think within this frame, within this boundary, it would be the fair price.
Yeah, this is the prices I keep hearing in Greece as a market, let's say, inside. And this is why I was wondering whether Europe is higher or lower than it is.
So Poland is higher, but the electricity price in Poland is a bit higher due to the fact that they have a large share of coal in their generation mix, so it's a bit lifted compared to.
But what about the costs, the construction costs of a PV asset in Poland?
It's more or less the same.
More or less the same. So it's more or less the opportunity that the
actually,
market
you benefit from the higher electricity prices, whereas you have basically the same cost for the construction. As to the PPAs topic, yes, so I can share with you that we would rather prepare pay as produced compared to the baseload. In the Excel, of course, baseload normally suggests higher price and that looks better. However, there are certain risks associated with having a baseload hedged. And we saw the effects of those risks in the energy crisis period in last year, where we have prices of 500 euros per megawatt hour or even more. So every non-produced megawatt hour was very painful. So I think that also caused, a shift of the producer to look more to the pay as producer. And of course, the general mix of how much PPA and how much merchant you want to have. It's highly tied to the financing cost as well, because you have the PPA to have some part of the revenue secured, to have better financing, I would say, like higher leverage. However, when the financing price increases and the electricity price increases at the same time, you do your optimization. So how much leverage is optimal for you for this price, and how much risk you want to take, having in mind the possible upside from the market. So I think that was very important, thought for every producer in the last years. Of course, now the market is going to be stable again. I think it stabilizes, so the market, it will change again. And I think that we will see more PPAs being in place in the future.
Thank you so much. Yeah, did you have something else to add with respect to the tenor and how you see it?
Yes, I believe that at least for the Greek market, the 10 years tenor, the 10-year duration looks pretty, let's say, hard to be digested. I think that the Greek market will stabilize, will find a balance, will find an equilibrium to shorter duration, to deals of shorter duration, like something like 3 to 7 years. I think that off-takers need to understand and try to understand that they have to do some long-term planning, but in the same time, the 10 years, a decade ahead seems too long for the Greek market. We have a large, small and medium enterprises sector, few very big industries, and the 10-year tenor is only for very big players. It's not for the majority of the Greek off-takers. I think we will reach in a couple of years an equilibrium for durations from 3 to 7 years.
And do you think, and this goes to the rest of the panel members, the banks and financiers will support a 3 or 5 years? I mean, how would you see shorter tenor?
I mean, we are financing in other European countries up to 10 years. And that isn't an issue. It always depends on the strength of the off-taker. And we take a look at him and we basically then make our assumptions about it, if it's possible or if it's not for us. So I think that's always key. Having a close contact also to the bank and then seeing who is the off-taker and is it acceptable for the bank to finance on that basis.
Shouldn't it be also who is the seller? Why not the strength of the seller?
Because in the end, if you have non-recourse project financing, then it's to a large extent the question how stable is the product itself, how good is the radiation, how good is the technical equipment, the O&M, that all comes into play. But essentially, in the end, is one of the big parts is, of course, will the off-taker still be there in 10 years, and will he be able to deliver the payments? That's why you have a stronger focus, at least when it comes to PPA, I would say, on who's the off-taker and can he actually take it.
Thank you so much. Grete, any comments?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that shorter term PPAs, from my experience, are also doable from the financier's perspective, but also this is always a discussion about the terms and conditions. Basically, you just find your equilibrium. The financing provider and you as a developer, you just find the spot which is suitable for both of you. So I think that it's more this kind of discussion in the recent years compared to what was the case. Yeah.
I think it's a happy place for lawyers, you know, because it's still very individualized. You still need a lot of consulting from them.
Indeed.
They're happy to make some money.
Lawyers have to lawyer. Indeed, and now moving from the PPAs to something that could be also relevant in terms of its storage. So how do we see storage being part of this transformation we're seeing? Maybe can it be combined with PPAs as to provide some kind of saving? How would you see the overall role of storage in the future, in the immediate future of grids and PPAs?
Extremely important. You can't live without it, you need it. I mean, that's clear. Not enough investment is flowing into it. I think that's partly due to the fact that the question is who would like to invest into it, and I think the game at the moment is simply like, if I would be an all-equity investment house, then I most likely would do it, and I would do it without any debt, to be quite honest, because I think the volatility in the next 5 years is going to be the biggest, and I think banks are still very much looking at, and we are looking at, having some sort of capacity market or some sort of baseload payment for actually providing those batteries to the provider of the battery. So I think for us as a more conservative house, that is still key in order to finance it. I think most money for equity houses can simply be made in using the volatility of the market at the moment. That's why I would say like it's currently more an equity game than a debt game.
Okay, insurance.
Yes, batteries will enable more investments in the renewable energy sector. And of course, it will relieve somehow will offer relief to the grids. So we are expecting and we are investing as a company in this sector in hybrid projects. But it is not enough. Only batteries it is not enough. We speak also about storage through other solutions, and I think this is the game changer for the future. And we, as I told you, we invest already in these new technologies, not only with batteries, but also storage as a greater title.
And do you see that storage...
Sorry to interrupt you, and it will also enable more PPAs. PPAs will find the way to the, let's say, pay-as-consumed profile through batteries.
Exactly, that was one of the questions, whether we can have, let's say, from the market discussion we had so far, it seems that the batteries within the context of PPAs, they need to be large enough in order to make a substantial, let's say, change the price. Otherwise, it's a nice to have. But I guess if we can have them to have enough capacity, then we could have PPAs for hybrid projects. I don't know if you have seen this gradually on the road, to what extent.
I think if you look at the current grids and the shortage in grids, then it becomes really clear that batteries are necessary and that they're a good business opportunity at the moment. The core question is always for how long, right? Is it a short-term opportunity where you can make a lot of money and then it will even out because there are so many batteries out there, or so many batteries attached to the grid of different forms, like electrolyzers or any other forms of storage. So I think you're not going to see the same terms as you see in the renewable energy markets in the form that we have 10-year PPAs or something like that. I think they're going to be shorter term, and the question is then simply what objectives do you have with regards to your IRR or to your CUC requirements on the individual projects, and does it even make sense to put that in there? Yeah.
Insurance is good.
Yeah, so in my opinion, currently in Europe, almost every country incentivizes deployment of the battery storage in their own grid. Lithuania, so all of them are very different, in very different stages. I would say Lithuania also started doing this year, so you actually get prioritized if you attach battery storage to your solar PV or wind or hybrid project, and you get higher chances of getting the grid capacity basically. So they incentivize that through that. For an equity investor, the business case, I would say, for now, it's still not that clear, you know. There are some parts of the puzzle missing. However, we in Ward, so we have several development projects where we have implemented the battery storage. Some of them are hybrid ones where we have solar, PV, onshore wind, and battery storage. Some of them are just solar with storage or wind with storage. So that's implemented. Lithuania has also state-owned battery storage already built and operating in its grid. And yeah, in my opinion, this is one, as you said, one of the ways to just like strengthen the grid. How long this will be needed, I'm not sure. However, we all know that these grid infrastructure improvements is a very, very long process and very pricey process. That's why I think that it will happen all over the Europe, because that's a way to solve it in a shorter period of time.
Thank you so much. I think we're almost...
Maybe Q&A.
Yeah, some Q&A and some closing remarks left. Anyone from the audience?
Anyone have questions?
We fully covered all...
Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wojciech, Telefonica, a Polish manufacturer. I'm really pleased with what you said, President, and that was very good, obviously, information. But the question really is to Ioannis. That's a great that you obviously have a very high ambitions to develop 1 gigawatt, but is that going to be an onshore project, or have you got ambitions to go offshore? And the next obviously question, which I'm going to obviously ask you, which markets are the most obviously markets which are going to develop the projects, because I understand that you have moved that from Romania. I know that mainly obviously you are focusing on the Italian market and the South American markets. Are there any other markets which you're trying to penetrate, or?
I'm authorized to speak only about Greece. So that I'm not responsible for the stock, let's say, to go up or down. No, but I told you it's only for Greece. And in Greece we are investing only in PV and wind and hybrid projects, but only onshore. No offshore, at least so far. This is the strategy.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ioannis from REIA Energy. I have one question for Mr. Müller as a banker. My question is, from our experience in Greece, in the last, let's say, until 2014-15, the investments in renewables, especially in wind and PV, were safety ports for the banks. There was feed tariff, there was feed premium, they knew what they were expecting, etc. We know that this have changed in the last years. We have the PPAs, we will put batteries, we will not put batteries, the cost is huge for the batteries, at least at the time we don't know what will happen in the future. So nowadays, and let's say for the next 5-6 years, do you think that in Europe, and specifically in Greece, these investments are still a safety port in comparison with other investments? Thank you.
Thank you for the question first. Look, I think if you come from the big trends, then it's clear that we will need round about 4 times as much energy generation as we have on a global level. So the demand for energy will simply grow and grow and grow, and especially the demand for renewable energies as well. So I think from that narrative, it simply makes sense to invest into it from an equity and from a debt perspective. And then it simply comes down to the individual project. And there, I think it became riskier, and it also depends on which technology are we talking. Like in offshore, we also have seen more difficulties, let's put it that way. I think PV onshore is really still a quite safe haven, and if it is structured in a way, also the financing structure, that everybody can get comfortable with it. And I think especially PV onshore is still a very safe haven. Wind onshore, I don't know. If you look at the wind yields, they are fluctuating rather strongly, in my opinion, if I look at them, and hardly ever you meet the P50. But also there, I think if you structure it conservatively enough, and if you find partners you really want to build a long pipeline with, then that's also like a not risk-free, but a good investment for any bank who wants to get into it. So overall, I think it became trickier, it became riskier, but it's still an incredible growth area. And somewhere where we want to grow as well, and which we see as risk averse and not very risky. That's how it.
And in this respect, I have a follow-up question. Ask us the increase, let's say, of the energy needs worldwide. What would you say are the key factors driving that such increase, especially when considering that we have lots of focus on energy efficiency, so someone might say that needs might stabilize, because it's a very interesting, it's true, but just really.
Well, on the one hand, we have the electrification of mobility, right? That's driving a huge part of the growth. And on the other hand, I think there's always this example of like in the 60s, only every fourth household had a small TV, and then like in the 90s or 2000s, everyone had a TV. But it was much more energy efficient. Yeah, but everyone had one, so we needed the same energy, and now we have 4 to 5 of them. So even if they are more energy efficient, we are still consuming more energy along through that. And I think this is going to continue. And I mean, I think for the next 20 to 30 years, at least, electrification of mobility, electrification of a lot of other parts of the way we are living, data centers, you name it, is simply going to drive that growth, and that's why investing in energy generation and transmission, I think those are always important parts that make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Ioannis and Grete's views on this one.
Yes, from one hand, the increase of demand. On the other hand, at least for the Greek case, is the exporting opportunities of electricity, of green electricity. I think that we will reach a point with higher interconnections in, let's say, some years from now, either to Italy or to the northern borders, and this will further push, let's say, or pull the demand up in order to create this space.
Yeah, so as Jens mentioned, we have the electrification, especially e-mobility is one big pillar, I would say. Another big pillar is heating and cooling. So heating is getting electrified, cooling, we need more of a cooling because of the global warming that we are experiencing, even hotter summers. We also have the whole potential of the green hydrogen production that is all over Europe. And it started to being implemented, at least in the Nordics already. We have, from the mobility's perspective, all the e-fuels for the ships, for the big transportation vessels. So I think that increase of the electricity usage is projected to be quite fast in the future. So there, where the demand comes from, for this,
Thank you so much. Absolutely. I remember the banker telling me a few months ago that the kilowatt hour is the new euro. We should be using the kilowatt hour now. Okay, thank you so much. I think we should give a really big applause to